Hey everyone, and welcome to another Sasquatch Theory podcast. On this episode, we have Theodore from Virginia, and he had some really terrifying Bigfoot experiences, and he also had a Class A Bigfoot encounter. Theodore described the creature as a giant gorilla or some sort of primate creature. He claims that these things were throwing rocks at him, and they were violently throwing these softball-sized rocks. The area that Theodore was investigating at, the farmer told him that he would find mutilated cattle, and he said when these things were around, the cattle would be terrified. Later on in life, Theodore ended up finding an area out in the forest where he was encountering UFOs, and he claims that these things were showing up over and over, and he even took people out there that didn't believe, that were completely struck by what they encountered. He doesn't believe that it's directly tied in with the Bigfoot encounters that he had in the past, but he does think it's unusual, and he has also encountered these unknown entities where he had these UFO sightings. It's hard to say if it's all connected, but I definitely feel like it's important to share, and a lot of people out there are experiencing things that they cannot explain, and it's definitely changing the course of where human history is heading. If you guys can, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below, and be sure to hit the bell notification if you have a Bigfoot encounter or any type of cryptid encounter that you would like to report here on the channel. Please be sure to get in touch with me. Alright, with all that being said, let's dive straight into our next podcast episode with Theodore from Virginia. All right, Theodore, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
Doing good, sir. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you so much for asking. Theodore, if you would, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your Bigfoot encounters and experiences from the very beginning, please.
Sure. My name is Theodore, which I've shared with you. I am originally from Southern Virginia. I lived there many years from the time I was 5 years old until 2017, and this is where a lot of my experiences took place. Um, as I said, I grew up from when I was 5 years old in Virginia up until 2017, and I moved to West Virginia where I live at now. Um, my encounters with the Bigfoot started around 2004 when I had a coworker of mine that was experiencing some things on his property. Um, he had called me and confided in me about some things that were going on. He had tried to talk to other individual people that he knew about it. I mean, even his own pastor, ridiculed him and made fun of him. And he confided in me, and we had a respectful relationship, with each other, and became pretty good friends. And had shared some of my experiences with him. And he had asked me, he said, well, one day when you're not too big, can you come down here? He says, I've got something here on my property. And he says, I know it's not a bear. He said, this thing is making all kind of this growls and whoops and things that I just don't, he says, I don't know how to explain it to you. And so I came down there, and it was on like a Friday evening, and I came down about an hour or two before dark. And while I was there on the property, I was standing out there, and he told me he'd been hearing it. He says he even had seen this thing from a distance, and he said it was black in appearance. And he says, I don't know what this thing is. He says, it didn't look like a bear. He said, this thing was making all kind of noises. And while I was down there, like I said, I got there, I think it was about, if my memory serves me correctly, about 7:30 in the evening. It usually gets dark around 9 o'clock. This was in probably about June, July of 2004. Um, and what had happened, my time down there, I was down there for about 30, 45 minutes. And then I went outside and, I told myself, well, I'm going to go and stand outside and listen for a little bit. And I guess about 45 minutes into my visit down there, I was outside near my car and I heard this, and I was walking around and there's a strip of trees that goes right down all there on the farm. The gentleman I was talking about has a pretty good sized farm. It's about, I'd say about 75 acres at least. And there's a tree line that goes right down there's his house, then there's his yard, and then there's a tree line, and there's a huge field. I mean, huge field that's back over in that area. And while I was standing there, I heard something in the trees over there, and it was sound like it was tearing stuff up. And it started out, it started like I could hear like a gruntle growl at me, and then it got louder and louder, and then it went into like a full blown roar. And I was like, I mean, it startled me. It's like, what in the world is this? I mean, and it just, all my hair on me was just like the hairs on my arm were standing up, and I'm just said, it just literally startled me to the point I felt like we're going running back to the car and getting in the car, and I didn't do it. I said, no, I'm going to, I stood my ground, and this thing was roaring and growling, and it started throwing stuff at me. I'm standing in the backyard next to the tree, and next thing I know, there's rocks being launched through the woods at me out, and they were rolling just about. They wouldn't hit me, but they come close. There was sticks and other thing, branches being thrown at me, and I backed off and I got around to the other side of the car, and it lasted for about, I don't know, good 10 or 15 minutes. And I mean, I didn't see it, but I could hear it. And it was like I said, it sounded like an elephant coming through the woods, just knocking trees down. And I guess I was getting too close, or it's something. And it started, I mean, there was rocks probably about the size. Oh, some of them were about the size of softballs and bigger, being launched through the woods at me, and they would come across and crash and roll down, almost, hitting me. And there was like tree limbs and branches and stuff being thrown at me. I mean, pretty good sized branches. I mean, a couple inches in diameter being thrown at me. It just, I guess, this creature was very territorial. It wanted me. It didn't like me being, because I tried to get closer and it didn't like me getting closer to it. So I backed off. And like I told you, I went back around to the car, and it lasted for, I don't know, a good 10, 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, that's very
And then,
interesting. The creature decided to become very territorial whenever you showed up. Was it doing this to the property owner?
yes, sir, it was. I asked him, he said it was doing the same thing to him. He said he called it, he did catch a glimpse of it. At the time, he had his children living at home with it. They were preteens, teenagers. I think they were preteens at the time this happened, late teenagers. I'd say at least preteen, teenagers. I can't remember exactly how old. I think they were around, oh, memory serves me correctly, about 15 to 16 years old. But his wife had told me too, and the kids both had said, there's something out there. We don't know what it is. He says, it's been going like this for a couple of days. Uh, and I won't use the man's last name, but his first name was Russell. Russell had contacted me, and he said, he called me, Theodore, but, Ted, or, sometimes I, went by nickname, but mainly Theodore. But he says, Theodore, he says, I don't know what this is. He says, I've had this, it's out there. And he says, I've got my cows out there on the property. My cows are going ballistic. We've got cows that's getting out the fence now, and they've never done this before. It's like they just take off they all hurt and just take off like in a stampede, and take off and run away as far as they can get away from that section, because the way the fence line was set up, the fence line went down or wrong, or went around and down around the edge of that tree line that I'm telling you about. And he had, about 40 or 50 head of cattle, and he said it was scaring his cattle there. They were running off. Some of them were getting out, and his wife had said that she was hearing this thing out there. When you would go outside in the yard, if you got too close in that area, it would get aggressive, like you said, start growling, make like this growler, and then it would start almost like into a roar. And the kids too, they got to where they wouldn't go outside, didn't want to do nothing, y'all. They stayed inside because they were fearful, they were frightened. I mean, the kids were just, shaking, when they was telling me this. And I'm interviewing them, and these kids are, you know, I've met these kids before, and they're not prone to lies or exaggerations. Neither was Russell, his wife. And I've worked with them for 5 years before this incident happened. Well, not his wife, but Russell himself. And yes, every one of them had experiences with it, but they never would see it face to face. But this thing let them know and know in certain terms that, hey, you're invading my territory, my space, and I don't like it.
Yeah, and how long was this going on for the property owner?
Altogether, I'd say off and on for about 2 or 3 years. It finally calmed down in around the end of 2006, 2007. Around the end of 2006, excuse me, into 2007. And 2006 is when I think it was around June or July of 2006 is when I had my close encounter of the Bigfoot kind.
Yeah, that's very interesting. The activity and the encounters that I had here at my place lasted about 2.5 years. So that kind of lines up with what I experienced myself. And did
Yes,
you
sir.
did you have to take cover whenever this thing was throwing rocks? I recall you saying that you hid behind the car or you got on the other side of the car.
Well, what I did is, I have a lot of experience in hunting. As I, emailed and told you, I'm a seasoned hunter, and I have had. I will tell you, down in that area, there are black bears there, and I have seen black bears there, but I have never, had an aggression towards me by them. That's why I knew, in the way this thing sounded, I knew that there was something different about this. So, these, yes, the answer to your question is yes. I felt like that I didn't want to invade this creature's space no more than I did. It was already getting very aggressive toward me. Like I said, it started out at like a gruntle growl, and then it got real loud roar, and the roaring would uh, reverberate, however you want to say it. I mean, I could feel it in my body, in my chest, and it just made my head. So yes, I did back off. I backed off a good 20, 30, 50 yards or more probably, because the car I had was parked on the front side of the house. I'm on the back side, and I'm walking out. There's the backyard, and it goes out near that tree line, and I'd say not in the middle, but at the very back of the tree line, I started walking towards that, and this is where this started happening. And I guess this thing could see me or whatever or sense me, but it let me know, hey, and I backed way off. And like I said, I went all the way back to the car, and I was pretty, shaken. And I've had encounters, in the woods. I've seen bears, I've had them come out, we going down through there at times, but it crossed in front of me where they was almost, I was only like maybe 10 feet from hitting this with my car, and they just stopped looking, and then they went on across the road. So yes, I did back off when it started, launching these rocks about the size of softballs or bigger and stuff. I backed off because I knew that whatever this thing was, because I couldn't see it at the time. I knew, but whatever this was, I knew it wasn't a bear, and I knew what bears sound like. I've, seen bear, I've heard bear. Yes, I backed off, and I got back as far as I could away from it, and I was like, I don't know what you are, but hey, I'm backing off. I get the message here.
Yeah, and a bear doesn't throw rocks. How close did these
Oh
rocks come
no,
to hitting you?
I would say, oh boy, me standing there, I would say probably about, oh boy, trying to guess it, probably they would launch them, they would come and roll within several, I mean, maybe a foot or two away from where I stood. That the rocks would throw when they threw the rocks through there, they would launch and come out and roll and stop. Maybe I don't know, maybe within a foot in front of me here or more. If I had to guess, as best as my recollection memory serves me, I'd say at least several inches to a foot away. That when they would launch it, you could see them launch it through the trees and come out, and it would roll on the ground, and then it would stop maybe 12 inches or more from being where I was standing. So I started backing off because I didn't want to push any more forward than that, because I wasn't sure what was going to happen to me at that time. Because yeah, I stood my ground, but I was like, look, I'm not going to let this thing scare me off. Yeah, I was scared, but I was determined I was going to stand there. It's like, no, and yeah, I'd say a good foot. The rocks landed a good foot away from me at my feet. Not too far away, at least a foot, I would say. For memory serves me correctly, best of my recollection, sir.
Okay, thank you. And could you tell if the rocks had like a rotation as if it was thrown by like a softball player, like underhanded, or was it more like a baseball player where they were more like a straight trajectory? Like, did they have an arch to them?
Some of them seemed like that. The ones I was throwing seemed like it had an arch, at me, like it was. I wouldn't say it was like an underhand, softball play. These things were being thrown out of the woods at a good rate of speed, with velocity that no, it wasn't like somebody pitching a softball to you. As a kid, I used to have, cousins and nieces and stuff that played softball, and they would throw underhand. No, these were being launched at me with a pretty good velocity. That if I had to come any closer, I would have probably got clobbered in the head with one. And I was like, no, I'm not coming any closer. This is enough. So I would say, if I had to say, I would say it would, if I had to guess, because I didn't see it throwing, but I would say it was thrown like at an overhand, not an underhand.
Okay. Yeah, and if these rocks would have hit you, it would have been fatal,
Yes, if
perhaps.
these rocks had hit me in the head, I probably would have suffered a severe concussion, or possibly would have took me out, because these rocks were, like I said, at least softball size, at least at least the size of a softball. And if I had stood any close, if I had been in the line of sight to say any closer than what I was, I probably would have got hit in the head with one of these. So yes, I would say it was thrown overhand, not underhand. It wasn't like, hey, I'm just going to throw it underhand at you and see how you react. This thing was tearing, like I told you, it tore trees up in there. You could hear it down there. You could hear it over in the tree line, being very aggressive, knocking trees and stuff down, breaking branches. And yes, these were being hurled or launched at me like somebody would throw a baseball.
Yeah, that's interesting. What impression did you get as they were becoming territorial? Like, what was going on back there?
Well, I was wondering if the first thing that come across my mind, I was like, what am I dealing with here? Uh, I knew this wasn't a bear, and I've seen there's some pretty large bears down in that area, but this wasn't a bear. This wasn't reacting like a bear. This Bears don't, like you said, don't throw rocks at you and throw branches at you. My first thought is maybe it it doesn't like me because I'm a male, me being a male, and it possibly was a male being aggressive. And then the second thing I thought about, well, maybe it has, maybe there's this thing has family with it. Maybe there's family back here, and it's just protecting its family. Maybe it had young, maybe there was junior Sasquatches or something back there. I don't know, but that's the two things I thought. Either it was aggressive to me because I'm being a male and I was shown, by me not backing off, me, standing my ground and trying to push forward, if it took it as a sign of aggression, because me being a male and it possibly being a male, this thing was, the way it was acting. And the other thing, maybe it has family back there. I was thinking that this thing, could possibly be a male the way it was acting. It was very territorial.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me. And before we move on to the next experience or encounter, can you describe the roar, the growl that you heard?
It started out. I'll I don't do good impressions with that, but I'll try to do with the best I can to reenact what I heard. It started out like,
Yeah, that's terrifying. I can't imagine hearing a sound like that out in the woods. And I mean, I've experienced it myself, not exactly like that, but like
this
tornado
thing
siren
start
sounds or screams. So I know they're
this
terrifying.
Yes, this thing had started out just like I just did, was the best impression I could do of it. It started out like growling, a gruntle growl, and then it just got really loud. And I mean, it echoed, and you could feel it in your body. I mean, that's when all the hairs and stuff, and that's like, what am I dealing with here? And that then when it started launching stuff at me, right after that's when it started launching stuff. The roar was bad enough, and I started back, and then when it started launching stuff at me, I was just like, I got to get, I started backing away, not turning my back away from it, but walking backwards towards my car and kind of watching, because I was in the yard there. It was in the safe zone, is what I'm trying to say, and I backed up and went and walked backwards to my car, and I was like, uh, no, I'm not going to try to go back out, try to press any farther than that. So I backed off and gave it its space. So yeah, it was very terrifying to say the least. I had never heard anything like that before. And like I told you, that's exactly what it sounded like. It started from like a low growl, and then it just went like to like a full blown roar.
Yeah, that's interesting. And earlier you described it kind of like a lion transitioning to
Yeah,
like a scream or
I
a
would
yell.
say yes. It just started growling like, and then the only thing I could compare it to would be, like a lion that you would see like in places like Africa and stuff. Well, I mean, they just roar. I mean, it just comes out and it's like, whoa, whoa, hold up here. What am I dealing with here? And yeah, that's what I would compare it to. It's like it started out as a low growl, and then when I tried to press forward, I mean, it just went to a full blown, like almost. The only thing I could compare it to was a lion. I mean, just like a loud roar, like I just reenacted for you here,
Yeah,
in this
absolutely.
interview.
And for the listeners, we're not talking about a mountain lion. You're just describing how a lion roars and you can kind of feel your insides reverberate.
I could feel it in every fiber of my being, in my chest, everywhere. It was like, I'm like, what am I dealing with here? I mean, I don't scare that easy, but this definitely scared me. And all my hair, I feel like, when you have like electricity or static electricity, all my hair, it started bristling up, and that fear started overcoming me. And I was like, at first I was like, I was holding my ground, but after this happened, I mean, I backed off. I didn't know what was going to come out, if something was going to come out of that wood and tear me to shreds, or if one of them rocks, excuse me, had it been launched and hit me, that would probably have been the end of the story right there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Theodore, you really got my attention now, and I'm really interested in hearing more about what you've experienced and encountered. Did you ever go back to that property, and what else happened after this?
Yes, I have. This property, let me give a little background history. Um, my uncle passed away. He was 90 years old, but he lived in this area. And as a kid, I would hear him relate some of the encounters and things that he witnessed for himself in this area. As a you know, when I was a young man, in my early years, say from the time I was like probably about 9 or 10 years old up until high school, he would share stuff with me. He would share stories with me about this area. He would experience activity there. He's telling me about mysterious lights that would appear and disappear there on the property. One time, him and a brother of his, this is in this area that I'm talking about. He said a light appeared in front of them on the ground about the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, Volkswagen Bug. This thing floated in front of them all the way from the place that they lived on. It's about 2 or 3 miles off the road, and once you leave the road, it's about 2 or 3 miles down a dirt driveway to get to the place where he lived back there as a kid. He said this light appeared about midway down the path. Him and his brother Herman were there, and this thing appeared and it floated in front of them almost all the way up to the front yard, and then it disappeared. This area has a lot of activity in it. It has since back in the early days, since probably the early 1900s. Uh, Everywhere around in that area, probably for about a 25, 30 mile radius, there has been all kind of activity there. There are newspaper posts. There's there's newspaper articles about stuff that has taken place there. I do have some of the newspaper articles, some of the reports, not so much about Bigfoot, but about other, if I want to use the word supernatural, or some people say paranormal encounters in these areas. So it has a history, goes back at least from the early 1930s, 40s on up. And there is still activity that happens in this area within about a 20-25 mile radius of this area that's been going on since the early 1900s.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And a lot of these areas where people encounter Bigfoot, they see strange lights and have other strange things happening, such as UFOs, paranormal, supernatural things. And I don't know, it's strange because a lot of the places where people report Bigfoot encounters, nearby there's also things such as like dogman encounters. And it's hard to say if it's connected, but there's certainly something going on.
Well, I will say one thing about that, sir, that I don't believe that this thing is a paranormal creature, because what I've seen was a real live creature that I can't explain to it. It left visible evidence. The part I didn't get into is about that I went down there later, a day or two later, and came back during probably around lunchtime hours. And I was able to get into that area. There were trees down there knocked down that were pretty good size. There were some prints there in the area that we could see that was at least 15 to 16 inches in length with 5 toes. So it left visible evidence there. I mean, the rocks that were there were still laying there. I showed them to the property owner. He went back there with me. I talked to him and I said, to walk back there with me. He saw the rocks laying there. He says, "Where did these rocks come from?" And I told him. He says, Oh, he said, well, same thing happened to me, and similar things happened to me like this too. And I showed him the rocks and I showed him some of the stuff had been, throwed at me. And then we went back there and we did find tracks, very close to the tree line there because it was soft ground and it left five-toe tracks that was at least 15 to 16 inches in length. And I wear about a size 10 and a half and 11, and it made my foot look small compared to it. If, me putting my foot down beside, right near the track. And both of us wore about a size, 10 and a half, 11 shoe. And even that made our feet look small.
Yeah, that sounds like a huge creature. Okay, Theodore, if you would go into these next experiences and encounters.
Okay. Well, I wanted to let you know too, before I get into the face to face, well, not, I wouldn't say face to face, but let's say close encounter with this Bigfoot. There was other things that's going on down there. I would say like orbs on the property there. There were different color lights that would float across the fields down there. They would be reddish orange. It would be green ones, blue ones. Some of them were small, about the size of a golf ball, and some of them were probably the size of a soccer ball that would float around and would move around in that property in certain times of the year. I would see them down there on the property. They would appear and disappear, and some of these things, being a Christian man, I was wondering, if some of these things, if I want to use the word vibe or sense that I got from these things, some of these things didn't seem like they were good because this is an area too that I failed to mention. There was Civil War battles taking place all across the lands there in this area. I had one of the experiences I had, and I had my wife here with me, and she was with me on several of the encounters and incidences that took place in that area and on properties down there. One of the things that happened on that very property too, that I was there one day with my wife, and I went down to visit this person because him and I worked together, and I went down to visit. And that evening, when we got ready to leave there, we had a very weird experience in my car as we were leaving. We were going down the driveway to a certain point, and all of a sudden, through all four speakers in the car, the sound of a bugle, trumpet or bugle came through all four speakers of the car. And I I was like, what is this? And it sounded like, and I went down in that area. There's like museums in, history museums, and there's, battlefields around in places where Civil War battles have taken place. So I went to talk to some of these people about what I'd heard, and that individual told me what I heard, and she started playing some of the recordings that she had. And she says, "Well, you let me know if one sounds very similar to what you heard." And what I heard, one of the ones she played was like a Civil War bugle being blown at the sound like of a Civil War battle or something. I can't explain it, but it came through all four speakers of the of the car over the radio. This wasn't a radio station or anything. This come through and overpowered the radio station where it was at, and it was that sound I told you, the sound of, the woman told me that what I heard was a Civil War bugle being blown. And I had told the property owner and talked about it, and he says that yes, he's experienced some of the same things there on the property because his dad and my uncle knew each other. They were about the same age. They knew each other and they had had some of the same experiences. And this gentleman living on this property and in this area had had some of the same experiences.
And what do you think it was?
What I believe it was, and this is just my own opinion. You know, I can't substantiate anything, but I do believe that on this property and in this area, there is such a, I don't know how to explain it, but it has, like I told you, there is supernatural, paranormal, whatever you want to call it, experiences that have happened in this general location in this area for years. That what I am thinking, because I have had also had people that I have talked to that live in this general area have said that told me that certain times a year between February and April, they have encountered, they said they have seen apparitions that look like Civil War soldiers, to be more precise, Confederate soldiers that they have seen appear and disappear certain times of the years, certain time of the year. And I do know that somewhere between, if I can remember correctly, between February and April, there is battles that took place in that area that are recorded on placards down in those general areas that I do have. I did take some of the pictures of those placards and things, and I do have them in my collection of photos and things that I have taken uh, to substantiate some of the things that these people have told me that live in this, you know, in this area. So what I'm thinking is that there is some type of, I do believe that there's some type of, I don't know what to exactly call it, if there's some kind of doorway, portals, whatever you want to call it. There is something in these areas where this type of activity will come through and will be manifested and will be seen, and there will be physical manifestations that can be recorded or seen visibly certain times of the years, like I told you about the people seeing, and they explained to me exactly what they were seeing. You know, they said that Confederate soldiers, that, you know, they were dressed in uniform, they were carrying, you know, weapons, and then they would, you know, go across a certain place where some of these battles have taken places, and go a certain distance in some of these areas and then disappear. And then I heard that for myself with that, and I had never had anything like it happen before. And my wife was in the car with me. We just looked at each other, and then I went to one of the Civil War historians museum there in the area, and I explained to the woman. I tried to, you know, explain to her exactly what I heard, and I tried to make the same kind of sound that I heard to reenacted what I heard, and then, you know, she told me, she said, "Well, listen to some of these and see," and then she got to a specific one that was a Civil War bugle being blown, you know, and that's what I heard. You know, I don't have answers for all these things, but I do know that, you know, me being a Christian man, there are things that I've read in the Bible that I absolutely believe that there are these kinds of occurrences. You know, things that would appear to people, people would see things that would manifest. I mean, there, you know, there's good things and there's bad things. Did that scare me? No, it just surprised me with that, and I have substantiated that with many witnesses down there that have, that a friend of mine has told me that they wouldn't come publicly and come out and tell people, but I got to know some of these people through this individual, and they confided in me, and I took their story, took their accounts. I won't say stories, but their accounts, and had my own experiences with these things. So it validates what they have seen and heard because have experienced some of the same things that they had.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and that's an excellent explanation. So, like, basically, I mean, the way I think about it is if people are seeing Bigfoot, UFOs, experiencing paranormal activity into like a high level of paranormal to where like, someone has to like have like an exorcism. If all that's real and it can happen, who's to say that, Jesus didn't really rise from the dead and Moses, parted the sea through the power of God, If all those things exist, who are we to say that didn't happen in the Bible?
Well, there's some things that I don't know if I will share in this interview, but maybe on a later interview, if you would ever have me back again, that there's some other things that I would like to share, but I will have to get permission from some of these people. And there's some things I need to get, make sure that you know, the things that I share, I got to make sure uh, with those people that, and the things that I've experienced that I would feel really comfortable with sharing some of these things. Like I said, I know I haven't mentioned this before, but I did email and told you, I've been at this for many years now, at least I'd say 18, 19 years at least. And, I've have experienced craft that I have seen with my own two eyes in this area. I will tell you this is some of the things I got to be careful what I share, but I do know that there was some type of experiments, or not experiments, but what's the words I want to use here? There was some type of flight going on down there, some kind of test flights that was going on down there in areas where I did see things that I do believe that were possibly military or black budget craft that I did see with my own two eyes, and my wife with me have seen the things. I've even had times where I would, people would, ask me, we would talk about some of these things, and, they actually went with me to actually got to see some of these things for themselves. But the area has a great history, and there's articles in the Richmond Time Dispatch in Virginia. I have some of the articles. I have accounts there from MUFON and other places that area down there does have. It's a hot spot. It's stuff that's been going on down there. I mean, I won't go into all of it, but I have spoken to some of the people that some of the same things that was being seen on the East Coast there in Norfolk and Virginia, Virginia Beach, have been seen in that immediate area too, and I have witnessed it firsthand. Craft that were saucers, like two plates, one turned on, one on the bottom and one turned, on top, like two plates put together. I have seen triangle craft, I have seen cigar shaped craft, and I have seen, craft there that come in, and I don't know what they're looking for, but these craft have put down lights in certain areas, and there have been cattle mutilations on in some of these areas down there, and I have seen some of the cows with body parts, things that were missing that I cannot explain. The the veterinarians come down and said that these animals have perished of some type of extreme trauma where there was things missing, like their tongues and just different organs on their body that I've seen firsthand for myself that were missing. And I have seen in that general area down where I'm talking about in Southern Virginia. that that there was lights being cast down from these craft onto into these areas, and then the farm owners would find their find cattle dead. Scavengers, none of the buzzards, nothing would come near it, would not touch it. But there'd be no blood visible, no tracks. I mean, I can't explain it. I mean, it's hard for me to even try to explain this because of the mystery surrounding this. I mean, there's no tracks there, no vehicle tracks, no blood, but the cattle were missing body parts, and the veterinarians had said that they had died from extreme trauma. So these are the things and I have encountered things down there for a multitude of years, all the way down there within a 30, 40-mile radius at least of that area. I don't know what it is about that area, but it's a hot spot, it's a hotbed, it's a hot spot for all kind of strange activity, whether in the skies or on the ground. Like I told you, there's orbs there. I have experienced electromagnetic fields on this property that would have physiological effects on the body that would make you dizzy, feel like you're going to pass out, feel like you were sick, just very weird and bizarre things that have been recorded by individuals that in some of these places around this cattle, there are radiation, detectable levels of radiation that I did not feel comfortable with getting very close to some of these because, the radiation from these things could, it has a physiological effect on the body that could cause, sickness or cancer and other things. So I had to be extremely careful.
Yeah, that is very interesting. And I didn't even have to ask you the question after conducting a Bigfoot interview. And the famous question is, have you experienced any UFO, alien, or paranormal activity? So that is interesting. Do you think somehow this activity is tied in with the Sasquatch? Was it close to the area?
I will say I believe there's some correlation between all these things. I don't know what it is. I'm not going to say that, Bigfoot was down there and then the UFO appeared because I didn't see a lot of that, but I did see a lot of the activity there. And I'm just going to tell you, I have seen some of the entities that are attached to some of these craft that I don't know exactly. There's ones out there that say that they want to spiritualize everything. You want to say, they want to say that God created everything, but, it's all demonic and there can't be any life outside of our own planet. Well, I beg to differ in that area. Is some of it demonic? Could some of it be negative? Oh, yes, because I've experienced some of that in some of these areas, but some of it, these were biological creatures that I cannot explain. I will share one or two of them with you. I did see one there that was about 4 foot tall. It had like pinkish grayish skin, black almond shaped eyes. It wrapped back. It had like long spindly limbs, arms and legs, no, what I would call very little slit of a mouth, no, earlobes like we have, you know, heads bigger than the size of their bodies that, appeared in these areas that my wife had seen things. We have seen things that appeared as one thing and shaped, transformed, or metamorphed into something else right in front of our faces. And I don't know exactly how to explain it, but I do know that these things were real. It wasn't something my imagination. And I know people out there will scoff and they will mock and make fun. Well, what was you drinking? What was you smoking? wasn't drinking or smoking anything. What I saw was real, tangible, uh, in your face. I could see it. It could see me. Other people there that have saw it, like my wife and others that have seen this. There's no figment of imagination. No, on illicit drugs or drinking alcohol. None of that. These things were tangible. I mean, I could have probably reached out and touched some of these things, which I didn't, but I mean, I was close enough to some of these things that I saw what they look like. You see a creature 4 foot tall at least, with black almond shaped eyes, large head, no ears, like ours, very slit from mouth, long spindly arms and legs, and of a grayish, pinkish color, I would say. And these things would, I don't know what they want, but they would come around this area. I do know one thing, in this area, there is contents of uranium in the ground in these areas. And I'm wondering if this is another thing that I failed to mention, that some of this activity is drawn towards. There's electromagnetic fields on the property that myself and other people have experienced that have been used like electromagnetic instruments to check things, not by myself, but others that have come there and checked, things on the property. So, there's places down there where there are deposits of uranium in the ground. So I don't know if that has anything to do with bearing on why these things appear in this area, but it's definitely a hotbed of places like this. And I have seen things down there that I have seen like shadow beings on this property that could change in shape into one thing and into something else. I would describe them as black hooded figures, at least 7 to 8 foot tall, with no facial features, just that were there. And I don't know if it's because of the things that happened on the property there, because there was deaths that took place on the property, around in a lot of these areas where uh, casualties of both, Confederate and Union soldiers died on these properties. There was horrific things that happened back there in the past that my uncle told me about. And I do know that there was witchcraft practice on some of the properties around adjacent to these properties. A couple of the properties that I'm talking about. So, back in the earlier days, that I was told that there was some women down there that were tried for being supposedly into witchcraft by their local, congregation.
Yeah, that's terrifying. And that sounds like a lot of activity to me. And yeah, we can certainly talk more in depth about everything you experienced and encountered with all of that activity. But if you would, yeah, let's continue with the Bigfoot experiences and
Okay, yeah,
encounters.
let's
And
definitely get to that.
yeah,
Let's
I
definitely
mean,
get to
but
that.
if you certainly want to talk about that after we talk about the Bigfoot stuff, I'm all ears. So it's up to you.
Okay, sir.
Hmm.
Well, like I said, I do appreciate you taking the time, and I would like to see if there was others that would come on the record with me. But a lot of these people, I'm going to tell you, have been ridiculed. They've been persecuted. They've been made fun of. Some of these people have moved away, since moved from the properties they were on, because they were ridiculed and made fun of. And, even the kids that, some of the children uh, have been, it got so bad where they were bullied in school and stuff, that, some of these people had confided and told me that they were made fun of because they went to school and shared some of these things, and their classmates made fun of them, their teachers. And some of these people got so bad where they picked up and moved. So I might go back into that after I share the encounter with the my encounter with this Bigfoot in 2006. So let me go ahead and get into that. So, like I said, from about 2004 up until about 2006, a little bit more, almost into 2007, there was things that took place on this property. And in 2006, I went down to see this individual, one of the properties that I was investigating. And he had told me he had been hearing things on the back. And this is in the same area that I'm talking about, one that was throwing the rocks and the sticks. That started out growling at me and then sounded like a lion roaring at the time. At the end it was so loud. And so I had come back down and I was talking to this individual, and he said, "Yeah, there's still some activity going on down here." And he says, "There's another property adjacent to me. It goes down a dirt road right down by my property." He says, "I've been hearing some stuff back in there, and that one of my neighbors has, heard some things back in there too. He's been hearing like, some things sound like coming through the trees, and like somebody taking a baseball bat and hitting upside the tree like knocks, and just different sounds that they were hearing." I was like, "Okay, well, sure." So what I did, I got in my car and I drove down. I went out of this man's property, went up on the highway, and I maybe went down the road there, maybe, I don't know, probably 100 feet from his driveway, 150 feet, and turned down. There's a little dirt road that goes down. I went down that dirt road, and he told me about where to go, and I went down that dirt road, and I was driving along, and I kind of felt led to stop at this one particular place. There's a like cut over, like there's trees down there, but they're real scrubby looking. They're not great big tall trees, but it's sort of like cut over land, if you know what I'm talking about. It's where a lot of the trees have been cut off previous, but there was trees there, but they were smaller in stature, not like the big hardwoods that was on the property that I was talking about. So I drove down, there was a field that I could drive into on this man's property. So I drove down a little bit farther, and I was kind of riding along, and then I saw this place that was just like this logging road, old logging road that went straight down through the middle of two tracks, one on each side of this logging road. And I had stopped down there, and I'd put the car in park, and I turned the motor off, and I eased out of my car, and I didn't slam the door. I just easily, you know, shut the door, but real easy, like you wouldn't slam it, but you just trying to shut it enough so that And I made sure I had the keys out of the car, so the buzzer wouldn't be going off in ignition. I was standing there, and I hadn't been standing there but a few minutes, and then all of a sudden, I'm standing there for maybe, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And I was getting ready to, get back in the car and leave. And I just felt like I should stand there a little bit longer. So I'm standing there. And the next thing I know, everything in the woods down there just got completely silent. I mean, no birds chirping, no nothing. It was like dead silence. And I just had this feeling come on me. It's like, something's not quite right here. It's like everything, the birds, everything quit chirping, quit, everything just got dead silent. And then the next thing I know, in the distance, I can hear what that sounded like, almost like a large bear, but maybe more. If I want to use this term, like an elephant coming through the woods. I was like, what in the world? And I mean, just coming down through there, and you could hear limbs popping, you could hear stuff. And I just stood completely still. I mean, I didn't move a muscle. I didn't cough or nothing. I just stood there, and I could hear it, and it got closer. And the next thing you know, this thing popped out from that in that cutover land and come out. I would say, oh boy, if I had to guess, I would say that it was maybe 50 yards or less from me. It come out, and I stood still, and it come out, and it stopped, and it twisted its upper body, not the top. It looked, and it moved its upper body and looked right at me. This thing was about at least 7 feet tall. I'm right at 6 feet tall with shoes on. And this creature, this Bigfoot creature, whatever you want to call it, what it was, that's what I called it. It was at least 7 to 7.5 feet tall, completely black hair. Its arms were longer. I mean, its arms were way longer than mine. Maybe not all the way down to the knees, but its upper limbs were very long. It was very muscular looking. It had black hair, and it just stood there and looked at me. And the only thing that I could compare it to is like it looked very much like I don't know, like a great ape or silverback gorilla. I don't know how to explain it, but this thing had it looked like sort of like a primate, but it didn't. It had almost like human facial features. Its nose was flat. It had like wrinkly skin up around its face and area. Now it didn't show teeth or none. It just stood there and looked at me. It had like its eyes were black, and I could see it. Its eyes were solid black, and it just looked at me. I mean, I didn't move. I just stood there, froze in a position. It stood there. It looked at me, and I looked at it. It didn't growl. It didn't do nothing because I didn't make any aggressive, sudden moves. I stood completely still, just as still as a tree on a day where there's no wind. Just stood there and looked at it. And I looked. It looked at me, and I looked at it for I know at least a minute. And it just turned, and it took like it just turned, and it walked straight into the other set of the trees on the other side, and took like 4 or 5 steps, and then I heard nothing. And then right after that, within, I don't know, I'd say 2 or 3 4 minutes, everything, all the woods come back to life, the birds started chirping, and everything came back to life. And I can't tell you what it was, but I will say that what I saw in what you saw on TV, like the Patterson film, was very much like what I saw. That's the only thing I could compare it to that I do believe that is real. Yeah, I've seen some that look real, but this is the closest thing that I could compare it to. Uh, I have never in all my life, I've been hunting since I was like 11 or 12 years old, and I had never encountered anything like that up until that point where I saw it distinctively. I saw it, it saw me. I know what I saw. It wasn't a figment of my imagination. I saw what I saw. It looked at me. I looked at it for at least a minute, and then it turned and walked away from me and walked down through the woods. It took like 4 or 5 steps and then silence. But it had that, I'd say at least 5 steps. And it made that same, it sounded like, going back down through the woods. And like I said, about 5 steps, and then I heard nothing. And then everything, the woods came back to life.
Yeah, that's an interesting encounter. So this creature looked very similar to the creature on the Patterson and Gimlin footage.
Yes, sir. I'd say that was the closest thing that I could compare it to. I won't say that it was fully primate, but it had facial features. Like I said, it had hair, black hair. It had long arms. That its hands came almost down. I would say close to its knees. And when it took off walking, it swung its arms out by its side. When it stepped, it come out the woods. It was taking stride, and its arms like that. And I guess I don't know if it sensed me because I stood still. I don't know if it sensed me or just like other animals in the woods, they can smell you or hear you or sense you. It stopped. It took when it come out the woods or from that cutover land, from that the cutover tree area that was there, and it came out. It took like two or three steps with its arms swinging by its side, but its arms were a lot long and they were pretty long. Then it just like froze and stopped and then looked directly over at me. And I looked at it and it looked at me for I know at least a minute. I would say at least a minute. I didn't, it wasn't like I was sitting there looking at the clock. Hey, yeah, it's been looking at me for a minute. It could have been long, but I know at least a minute. It looked at me and I looked at it and I tried not to, look, like we're trying to have a staring contest, but I stood there and it was just as much interested in me as I was it. It didn't make any aggressive moves toward me. I don't know if this was the same one that I encountered early on that property. And I can't say that, but it didn't make any, because I didn't make any sudden moves or aggression towards it. It didn't make any sudden moves or aggression towards me. We just stood there. I looked up at it. It looked at me. We stood there and looked, for I know at least a minute. And then it turned around and it started walking just like it did before, and it walked on. It didn't run. It wasn't like it was scared. It just, started walking off just like it did before. Like, okay, there you are. Hey, I'm just, like we would with another person. If you see another person come out the woods, like, oh, hey there, how you doing? It didn't, wave at me. It's none of this Harry and the Henderson things. That's just Hollywood. But it looked at me and I looked at it. It was like, well, yeah, hey, I see you. You see me. It's like, okay, and I didn't get scared. I wouldn't say that I was scared, but I didn't want to make any sudden moves to find out what this creature would do. So it turned around and it, started walking just like it did before. And it took like 5 steps down through the woods and then it just nothing. And I didn't hear it anymore. And then, like I said, everything started, the tree, everything in the forest you could hear, you start hearing like squirrels scamper around. You could see them. And I could hear the, birds start chirping again. I was like, so I did, after that, I did go back up there and tell the landowner what I seen. I got really excited after that. I mean, just like an adrenaline rush hit me after that, just like a couple minutes after. And I was like, oh my God. That's like, wow. I was like, it just, at time, then it just, oh, after that, it just completely overwhelmed me. And it's like the adrenaline set in. And I was like, I don't know. I was excited like a kid, on Christmas morning when kids come open their presents. I was like, oh my God. I just like, did I see what I just saw? It's like, in my mind, it's like, yes, you saw what you saw. I'm sitting there thinking, I said, yeah, you saw what you saw. It wasn't a figment of imagination. It's like, yes, this was real. And I told the landowner, he's like, you saw it? I said, yes, sir. And I explained to him the same thing I explained to you. I explained the height of this thing. It's like 7.5 foot tall, black hair, black eyes. I mean, it had like a flat nose. It had like a wrinkly looking face, like a older person would get, but like real wrinkly, like, been out in the sun and stuff a lot. Just, I don't want to use the word leathery, but I guess I could use that word. And it had hair all the way up around, at the edge of its face and around. And, like I said, it didn't show any teeth, but, it had a flat nose, black eyes. It just, to me, that's the closest thing I could, describe it as. It's like the, Patterson film, or, like something that primatologist or somebody like that see like a silverback or one of the great apes. I mean, that's the closest thing I could, compare this thing to. You know, there's other ones where I said that these things, some of these people told me it's like they were trying to communicate or talk to them or something. And it's like, it was like gibberish to them. And, I don't know, it didn't talk to me, but, it wasn't like it was making any kind of noises. I'm wondering, is this one of the times rarely where I caught this thing off guard because I wasn't making a lot of noise, and being perfectly still as a hunter, as a hunter, you got to be quiet and stand still and not make a lot of noise. Could this be the reason why that, it come out and it was, I won't say it was shocked, but it was like, it turned around, it looked at me and I looked at it. It's like it was kind of surprised to see me standing there.
Yeah, that's incredible. A lot of people think they know everything about the world, and once you see something like this, it'll completely change you.
Yes, sir, it does. And I'll tell any person out there, if you ever encounter anything like this, I don't care how much you're ridiculed, persecuted. I've even had pastors in these areas where these members of their own congregation that had this experience went to them and they were ready to commit them, to a psychiatric ward, saying that they were doing, illicit drugs, that they were high on acid or, shrooms or, drunk or, some of these were ready to have these people committed. And the only reason why a lot of these people come to me, I built a rapport with these people over the years, and the people that I work with, they felt comfortable. They felt easy talking to me about it because I've had experiences since I was a young man. Since I was a little kid, young man, that I've had that happened in my own life that I can't explain all of them. Since I became a Christian man, I've learned a lot of things out of the Word of God, that there are things out there that people say don't exist that I have seen with my own two eyes, and not only me, but other witnesses around me. I've had other people there that have experienced the same things that I have. That I will share one example with you. I had a coworker that, he wanted to laugh and make fun, he's saying, oh, there's nothing like that exists. Oh, I think it's just, exaggeration. So one day I got tired of it and I said, well, I put him on the spot and I said, look, you don't want to believe me? I said, that's all right. You don't have to believe me. I said, but would you like to see it? Oh yeah, I'll go there. Ain't nothing down there. So one day I met him at a location. And he got in the vehicle and rode with me and my wife, and he went down and saw some of the things for himself, and it completely changed his whole paradigm, his whole life. And after that, he wouldn't speak to me anymore. He went from scoffing and mocking to, after that, he saw it for his own two eyes and, experienced everything for himself, some of these things. And he didn't want to talk to me anymore after that. He went from like, it's like, uh, this is real. And after that, he wouldn't talk to me anymore. We went our separate ways. And after that, we even quit being friends because he couldn't deal with it. He couldn't deal with his mind. He says, no, no. He was in denial. No, no. It's like, and then him and I drifted our separate ways. And before that, we were pretty good friends.
Yeah, that happens with people sometimes. They choose not to believe, and when you take them out there, they experience it. Their eyes just kind of bulge out of their head, and they have nothing to say.
Yes, and I mean this man actually. I mean, this man went pale. He went speechless. I mean, I thought the man was going to pass out or have a stroke or heart attack because his mind couldn't process what he was seeing. And I told him, I said, you be prepared. I said, when we go down here, I said, anything could happen. You could have any one of five different experiences. You may go down here and not see nothing, but this is one of the times where stuff was pretty active and this man saw the things that he saw. He saw the craft in the sky. One of these things come in. He saw this thing shooting down like a spotlight out of it. It scared him because he didn't know what to make of it. I mean, he saw some of the orbs on the property floating around, and he got to see some of the things at first hand. It's like, look, you want to see it? You want to see it? You think it's funny? And then he finally took me up on the offer, and he saw it, firsthand. It wasn't second or third hand. He saw it. He didn't go but by what I said or what somebody else had told him. He saw it with his own eyes, and he's like, I don't know what to, make of this. What is this? I mean, he was stumbling and fumbling for words, and I was like, and then after that, when we took him back to his vehicle, he barely would speak two words from me, and we worked together. And after that, we drifted apart. And after that, he really didn't, after that, he just kind of went on his way. I mean, he would avoid me like, I had, like had the flu or something.
Yeah, that tends to
I mean,
happen with some people. They just can't wrap their minds around it, and even after they experience it, they'll just kind of brush you off or never talk to you again or never talk about what they encountered with you
oh
again.
yeah, to this day, from what I understand, he never would open up, tell anybody. I mean, it's just like he just clammed up, and he's like, I'm done, and I've had people call me, and other people. My wife started investigating with me back in 2010, and she's seen some of the things. She's sitting here in the room with me, and she's seen some of the same things, and I can't explain some of these things I've seen. You know, all I can say is they're real. That they're it's a real phenomenon. These things happen. They appear. And there's been, and not just myself, they appear to my wife, other people that's there, the people that was there on the properties, their kids, the person's wife, their husband, their kids, their grandkids. There's even been law enforcement called into some of these. I mean, and some of these, and even the police department didn't know what to make of it. There's like, how do we put this down in a report? I even have a police officer that investigated one of these, and they started, making fun of him on the force, saying, making fun of him, calling him the ghost cop, or the paranormal cop, and started, kind of teasing him and belittling him on the force.
Yeah. And have you ever had any of these entities or whatever you want to call them show up at your house at nighttime?
Well, since you'd asked me that, I'm going to be honest with you. In 2012, I had two experiences that happened to me that, yes, two of these entities. Well, let's put it to you like this. I'm going to share it. I had these twice on two separate occasions. These entities come in my house. One of them, the very first one, I'm just going to tell it, and people out there can scoff and mock and say what they want to say, but me being a Christian man, this thing appeared in my room, and it didn't come by a ship or anything else, and it looked like a typical gray. And it was down in my room, and I'm just going to tell you, I called out, and I said, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus Christ. Leave this room, and it disappeared instantly. People didn't scoff and mock and not believe that, but it happened. And then I had one other occasion where I had like paralysis come over me, and I couldn't talk. I could move my eyes. I couldn't move my body, but I could move my eyes. And all I could think in my mind is, Lord, please help me. And all I can tell you, this bright entity come into the room, angel, whatever you want to call it. And this is not, I'm not under the influence of any drugs, alcohol, no prescription drugs, anything like that. I just want to get that out there too, because people say, there's no. this thing come in and grabbed this thing and removed it from my home. And after that, I never had any more problems. But I will tell you that even on the property where I moved to, that there's things that happen on there to other individuals. I will give you an example that one night I was standing on my back porch, out on my back deck, and I had a neighbor that lived near me. And I heard this was a husband and wife, a couple. I heard them arguing and fighting back and forth. And I was standing there, and then all of a sudden, everything just got really quiet outside, and this thing come out of their trailer, come down the steps. I mean, it's like it glided down. It come out and it stood and it stopped and looked at me. And it was one of these, I call them shadow people, shadow beings. Whatever. It looked at me for like 2 or 3 seconds, and it shot off so fast that it was like, I mean, it just shot off. I mean, it just took off. I mean, like, like a scared animal. I mean, it just took off and it jetted off so fast. I come off the back porch and tried to chase after it, and it was gone. It just looked at me like 2 or 3 seconds, and I didn't say anything. It just looked at me, and it just took off. Like, I mean, it just like gone, and I come down off the deck. I mean, I almost fell down the deck trying to get to it and stomach, and it was gone. Wherever it was gone. But it come out of there right after that fight, and everything got eerily quiet, just like what I told you about with the Bigfoot. But this thing was, I'd say, at least 6, 7 foot tall, and it was a black hooded figure, and no facial features and nothing, and it stood and looked at me for about 2 or 3 seconds, and then it shot off. It just looked at me, and it was like it just, and it took off. I don't know. I can't say because I didn't open my mouth and say anything this time, but it just took off. It's like gone, and these are just some of the experience I've had, and and I've had people down there jokingly, joke with me and my wife and said, "Well, you're the real life Mulder and Scully. You investigate real life X Files, don't you?" I said, "Well, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, and away we do." They can, some of these people I knew pretty good, and they just, and some of them just wanted to do it. It's like, hey, but I knew it, and I was like, well, hey, I won't take any offense to that. Yeah, I guess my wife and I are. When people come to us and want help and need help, and they can't go to even to their pastor or their doctor or others to talk to them because they think they're on, high on illicit drugs and stuff. And I will tell you, most of the people that I deal with were respected in their community. They were respectful people. There were, some of these people were law enforcement. Some of them were, upstanding community members. Some of these were deacons. Some of them were elders in their, local churches, hardworking people. Some of these people were firefighters. They were, rescue squad, uh, um, you know, people that work on the rescue squad, paramedics, and just good, decent working people. I've had very few that wanted to try to, just trying to do it to, get my attention or wanted to fabricate a story that I knew that, the details they give me just didn't add up. The ones in the family. See, what I would do, I'd have people we would take these people and interview them separately because, I said, well, I'll take the man and I have a woman with me, like my wife, and she would, interview the wife or the daughter or something. And sometimes their stories were completely different. It's like, and some of these did have a history of, um, illicit drug use. And so some of them, yes, but I would say at least 90% of the ones that I've investigated were truthful, God fearing, honest people that wasn't in it for, fortune or fame or, I'm coming on the record now. This is the first interview that I have ever done since all these things had ever happened. I would occasionally talk about it if people would come to me and ask me about it, and some people found out about it, and there was. But as far as doing, people would come and confide in me because I had people that I know that trusted me and confided in me that they are the ones that had these people to contact me. But I wasn't running around on every radio station. I wasn't on Coast to Coast AM or a lot of these other stations out there trying to. This is the first interview that I have done ever like this with a person like yourself.
Well, I appreciate you openly talking about these experiences and encounters, and especially for including I don't know what you'd call it, the UFO alien experiences, the entities, and the paranormal. But I do
Yes,
feel like
sir.
somehow it all ties in together. And where do you think this is all going? You've had Bigfoot encounters, you've had these encounters with entities and UFOs. What do you think's going to happen next? Do you think there's a bigger picture?
There is a bigger picture. I think I have to be careful what I say over the phone. There's stuff that I would like to say, but I have to be careful with what I say. I do know that some of these encounters, some of the things that happen, I think that it is not necessarily what people think. I have seen craft, like I told you about, that I had a person that was ex-military that was stationed out at one of the Air Force bases out west. That I knew, and I worked with this man. He was a career, he is a honorable discharged uh, Air Force uh, Air Force gentleman veteran. And I had him look at some of the things, and he knew with these things. He's seen a lot of seen about every craft and things. And, some of these things were a black budget. I'd say that they were military invested, like with things with like Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon. That there's some of these things out there because I don't know how much I want to share with you on this, but there was a place out there that Cessna pilots and things have encountered these craft in certain areas where there was an abandoned airstrip that was, from what I understand, that was bought possibly by some of these type of people. I have the report from Nightcap and MUFON where some of these, well, I'll give you one example. There was a pilot and his son on a Cessna that came in, and one of these craft had come in close proximity to the plane, that the plane started malfunctioning, and, they thought they was going to crash at this. And I have a lot of this stuff documented. I have newspaper reports. Some of these things go back into the 1960s that I've been able to retrieve, that I do have in my possession. There's newspaper articles, there's multiple witnesses, there's sheriff's deputies, there's firefighters, there's state police on record stating that they have solved these things. I have a police officer that saw one of these things over one of the cities nearby where I'm telling you that these things happen, that over 200 people saw these things, that the store owner saw them, landowners saw them, uh, sheriff's deputies have seen them. Firefighters came when one of these things landed in the road, and when the police got there and the firefighters got there, the pavement was still smoking, and there was holes in the pavement where this thing had landed, and the pavement was still smoking when it took off. And I have all those records on hands that I went through and completely done my homework, and I went into the research. You see, this is one thing I will tell you about this stuff. I'm not just one to just to go out there, somebody tells me something like this happens. I go and look for old newspapers, I look for witnesses, I look for physical evidence of these things, and there has been times where these things have left physical evidence, and I do think some of these things are not what they are posing to be. I do know the Bible talks about the Satan is the prince of the power of the air, that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the, rulers of darkness of this world, and against a host of spiritual wickedness in the heavenly realms. And I do believe that some of these things, I believe that some of these things, that there's about 3 or 4 different categories that you could put these things in. Some of them are, I believe, a black budget, black budget, possibly contracted work to different companies, contract companies out there. I do believe that some of these craft are actually, possibly from outside of our, outside of this earth. It's wrong, and I'm speaking for myself. It's arrogant for me to think that, all the life out here, all the cosmos, all the planets, solar systems out here in this vast universe, that we're the only thing out there. You know, some of the things I've seen, that they appear just by a biological entity that it's. I mean, it reacted just like I did. It wasn't, hallucination. It wasn't some apparition that disappeared. Uh, some of these things, yes, and some of them, no. And these were nuts and bolt craft. They left physical evidence. They left burn marks. They left marks out there where people that I known that come out there, and even people, MUFON investigators come out, and there's places where soil samples have taken place. There's places where there was marks left. So some of this thing I think is deception, and some of the things I think is things in our own, contract places out there that know what these things are. I have seen these things, and there was a strip that I was talking about where at night I have been down there, and I've had people get in contact with me, and this is no exaggeration line, because I have other people. My wife was a witness to this too. That like on a Wednesday night between the hours of 10 p.m. and midnight, that there's a strip, there's an old abandoned airstrip that on that night, that you know next thing you know, it will get real bright back, and next thing you know, you would see there would be visible craft that would, come out from behind the trees and go across. And next thing you know, there and this, back in the distance, I could see there's this thing that's got like a searchlight that goes back and forth, and there's an abandoned airstrip there, and then there's a small airstrip only within a couple mile radius between those two airstrips, and you can see searchlights going back and forth in the sky from where this craft goes to where it goes back and forth. And I have seen this thing, I mean, just do crazy maneuvers in the sky, just sit there and take off, and then just, and I mean, in just a few seconds, and then stop, and then come right back. These things were like reddish orange in color. They illuminated light all around them. There has times where there was high, like high voltage lines that run through there, and it was like these craft would come in near these things, and the lines would start popping and cracking and making all kind of crazy, especially when they got in, they would start humming real loud and cracking and popping. And I had people with me, and it's like, is these power lines going to explode? Are they going to something happen to them or what? So as far as what I think that there is different things. I do believe that there are black budget projects. I've had people come to me that have told me that they believe uh, that a lot of the people that came from in World War II from Germany, from the Nazis, came here and gave a lot of the technology, brought that here, and I've had people that have told me and showed me, things like paperclip and stuff that possibly some of this stuff was brought over here from them, and there's so many things that I have seen and witnessed that, yes, I think some of this is spiritual, the things it talks about in the Bible, you know, that it's real. I think some of it has to do with that. Some of it, I think it's, actually biologics, and some of it, I think, is actually, some kind of black budget project.
Yeah, absolutely. It does sound like black budget material, and I do agree with you that there are forces on this planet that don't want us to know what's going on. And you mentioned the reference from Satan that he's the prince of the air, and I kind of tend to
Yes,
agree with that statement.
yes, he is, and he is great at deception. I mean, he's great at deception, and the Bible even says that, he comes, he can even transform himself into an angel of light. Yes, I have seen the deception of these things. I've had people come to me that, how do I explain? I've had people that have come to me thinking they were one thing, but when they confronted these things, that they appeared to, they manifested themselves and showed clearly what they truly are. And it wasn't Grandma Elsie or, Uncle Fred or, none of the other things that they, thought they were. I have seen these things. I worked with a man for many years that I didn't share, but, he was a third generation preacher. And, I worked with him on these type of, this is where I first, got exposed to some of this as a Christian man. And I was like, you know, you know, when I first started out, I was like, some of this stuff as a kid, maybe it was just a bad dream, or maybe it was just, did I eat something before I went to bed that made me, but later on when I began to witness these things, and I was like, no, this is real, but some of it is deception and some of it's not. Some of these things appear to be, little, you know, grays or whatever. And then when they are confronted, they show themselves what they really are. You know, I don't know if people out there in the listening audience know who Joe Jordan is. With I think it's the CE4 research. I have had some of the kind of the same, down some of the same lines that man has. And, some of these people were Christian people. And, some said, well, if you're a true born again Christian, these things wouldn't appear. It's like, no, I don't know what you've been told, but that's not true. These things appear to, people accounts in the Bible, Ezekiel, what he saw. I mean, it just, Peter's in a jail cell. An angel of the Lord comes, appears in the jail cell, brings him out of that jail with all the prisoners asleep. And the Bible says he opens all the doors. The angel of the Lord comes and takes Peter out of the jail and the prison he's in and brings him out and delivers him while all the jailers slept. And put all, turn them all off if you want to use that word, switch them all off. There's things like that. It's like, yes. And I do believe there's things out there from the enemy that are part of end time scenario that will manifest itself as some of these things. Yes, it can take on the appearance. Sure, it can. You know, I mean, there's so much out there's a whole nother world out there that people don't understand and know because they've been taught. I've known people that's been taught to mock and scoff at this stuff their whole entire life, and still, until it happens to them, they've got nowhere to go. They can't go to the family. They can't go to the pastor. They can't go to their doctors. And I've been privileged by the Lord to, to have and count, have these people that would come and confide in me because, I build a rapport with these other peoples and say, hey, yes, you can come talk to him. He will listen. He's not going to laugh in your face. He's not going to say, hey, you was out there, out there, doing acid or doing shrooms or, doing all these crazy things. And yes, there have been some that I've come across that, yes, I got to be honest that, yeah, there was some that, that they were on these things, but there was a lot of them that wasn't. That there were good, genuine people that were sober. They didn't do drugs. They didn't drink alcohol. They wasn't into hardcore drugs. They'd I mean, nothing. And see these things and to witness these things. So yeah, there's a lot going on out there, and and there's some of the investigators that I'm not claiming that I know everything, and I don't. But what I've seen and experienced, a lot of the things I experienced was not just second and third hand reports. This is I witnessed firsthand. I'm there. I see it with myself, and I have a team of people there with me that see it with their own two eyes. And people tell me, well, some of this stuff. Well, why don't you get it on video? Why did you get it on tape? Well, some of this stuff they have to understand is not easy to get on video and get on tape. Just like with my encounter with this Bigfoot, you know all the time. Only thing I had at the time was a crappy cell phone that wouldn't been able to take the pictures like this. Yeah, I do have some evidence and things out there, but I have to, before I go putting these putting it out there for people, I have to make sure, because if these people see stuff like this, they'll know where it came from. A lot of these people have confided in me in the last, 18 years or more. It's like, you know, I, I can't just go out there and share this stuff. I've took people there, and MUFON has seen some of the same things in that area. There's MUFON reports out there. There's in that area down there. There's MUFON reports. People can go on MUFON. I'll tell you exactly the counties that they can look in down there if they really want to look into it. There's Mecklenburg County in Virginia. There's Lunenburg County. There's Prince Edward County. There's Charlotte County. They can go on the MUFON website and search out these things, and there are bona fide, genuine reports that MUFON investigators have came and done their own investigation and interviewed the witnesses. So there's newspaper reports. I have the newspaper reports from that area that go back into the 50s and 60s down there. And I would be willing to share them with you or, someone, but, I made sure that when I do this, I have some of the evidence to back up the claims. It's not just what I'm saying. There's newspaper reports. There's sheriff's deputies on record. There's firefighters. There's store owners. There's military people on the record stating that ex-military that are Air Force or Navy or Marines. There's evidence out there. A couple of years back was the 50th year anniversary that came out, and I guess that article is still available. Of one of the places is called South Hill, Virginia, and people can look that up. They can go online and Google it or DuckDuckGo, whatever one. They should still be out there. about these accounts. And I have those newspaper reports. I have the MUFON reports. I have eyewitness testimony from people in those areas. So, I don't live down there no more, but, you know, I live here in West Virginia now. I live in the panhandle of West Virginia, but, I still investigate these things. My wife and myself are a part of some of the Bigfoot research that goes on up here. I do report to the West Virginia State Section Director on things. I have, been with him face to face and have shown him some of the evidence, and he was like, "Well, sir, this is very interesting. The things you shot. I know it didn't happen in my state or area, but it happens up here too. I've seen things up here too. I live, I only live 50 or 60 miles from Camp Dawson." And other places up here, I've had people that tell me that and I'll share one other thing since we moved up here. One night I saw 14 or 15 of those craft that went over back to back, and I can't explain it. And I went on and looked at the reports coming out of Pittsburgh. It wasn't airplanes. These things were coming. They were solid white. There was like at least 14 of them. I'd say at least 14 or 15 of them. They came back to back within a few seconds of each other. And there's a lot of paranormal activity up here in this area, near, what they call the Dolly Sods area, Canaan Valley area. And there's many investigators up here too, outside of myself, that investigate all these things. And I've seen them up here. Have I seen Bigfoot up here? No, I haven't seen that, but I've seen the other stuff since I've been up here. And there are reports of that on the BFR website, I believe, that there's been one or two cases within a few miles of where I live here. I live on the very mountain range where two of the sightings were seen here. Have I seen anything like it? No, but I don't get out and do these things like I used to, like in Virginia. I'm not, I'm not 20, 30 years old anymore. I'm, almost 50 years old here pretty soon. And, I don't get out, like I used to, and, track the woods and stuff. Yeah, I still do some, but not like I used to.
Yeah, that is very interesting. And I'll certainly check out the MUFON reports later. Do you have any more Bigfoot experiences that you'd like to share? Anything else that you'd like to add to the podcast?
Well, let me see. Let me think of everything I've been through down there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I will say that there's been other places down there that I have. There was a place one time that I was sitting down there in the evening time, not too very far away, a few miles away from where I was at. I was down there watching some activity sitting in my vehicle, and it was near one of these places that I had rocks thrown at the car, and they were hitting the back of the car, and I was concerned about my back windshield being busted out, so I had to crank up and leave from there. These things have some kind of pattern they go through there. I was talking to one of the individuals there. There's a river very close by there. It's called the Meherrin River that runs through that area. There's the Little Meherrin, and then there's the Big Meherrin that runs down through there. It's Meherrin River. I was talking to one of the people down there, and they were telling me that they have encountered things down in that area. And that's one of the things that I encountered very close to where that river runs, because I was trying to get to a closer vantage point to see some of these craft that were flying in down there, because uh, I had a lady that worked for the Census Bureau down there, and she went into an area where there's a road that goes back into this abandoned airstrip. And according to her, I wasn't there, but I know the lady, and she's been truthful with me, and she's not lied to me about other things, exaggerated or embellished about anything. Neither have I. And she said that she got a job doing the census work, and she went back in there because according to her, she was shown that there was a house back there, and she tried to go back there, and she said she was stopped, according to her, by some type of government officials or somebody that ordered her to turn around and vacate to turn around and get out of there. There was nothing for her to go back there to see. That place, that one house back there, there's nobody back there. It's nobody living there anymore. You don't need to be back here. She said she turned around and she got out of there. She said they didn't show her any credentials. She said that what she saw was two black SUVs that come out from back there and literally told her to leave and don't go any further, to turn around and leave and get off of that property and go back out. There's nothing back here for you to see, and there's nothing back here you need to come back here for. So I mean, there's things like this, and yes, I was setting that near that area that I was talking about, not too far away from there, in the area where these Bigfoot migrate through, because there's a beautiful river that goes down through there, and I've been down there doing a little fishing and stuff down there, and there's some kind of migration pattern. I don't know that river goes down through there and connects into bigger bodies of water further down the lines. Down the line there, down that river, and I think eventually it goes down empties out into one of the rivers or lakes down in that area. I can't remember the name of it right off the top of my head, but I was sitting very close to that when I had that experience. Something was throwing rocks down it like it didn't want me there. I don't know. This is one of the areas where one of the farmers had told me that he has seen and heard stuff down there, and there was rocks being thrown at my car at the time I was sitting in, and it was hitting back on the trunk, and I finally just had to get out of there. I didn't see what threw the rocks, but it was rocks. I mean, they was just hitting, and it was just like, and I was able. It shook me. I was able to get out of there, and I heard. I don't know if you just heard the pounding I just did,
Mm-hmm.
but that's what it sounded like, hitting the back of my car, and I got out, and I was able to get away from him, get a little ways up the road, and I got out. This was about right around dark, and I got my flashlight out because it was getting dark outside, and I shined my flashlight back there, and there was indentations on the car.
Yeah.
So
It sounds
there
like
is,
the activity is attracted to you, and it's a lot of information to take in. Normally I just take a report and a person had an encounter and a few experiences, but yeah, I'm sorry if I don't have a lot to say. It's just a lot to take in, and I believe you
well, yes,
100%. I'm the same. I've had a lot of experiences with the supernatural, with UFO and aliens, and with Bigfoot. And when you tell
well, I
people these
wouldn't say
things,
it's,
it's
yes, sir.
you tell people these things, excuse me, and they just don't believe you because it's so much information to take in. But it all truly happened, and it makes me feel like either it's attracted to me or somehow it's all connected, or there's a bigger picture that we're being deceived and
Well,
something.
I do, sir. I will tell you that there is deception in some of these things. Am I saying it's attracted to me? I don't know, because me being a Christian man, I try to help I try to help people, that come to me that they can't even go to their own pastor, they can't go to their doctor, and they have nowhere else to turn. At first I thought some of this was, malarkey. I'm just going to use mildly. I thought some of it was just, the imagination of people, and it's like, oh, no, but I got proved wrong. Am I saying it's attracted to me? I don't know, but I have a close walking relationship with the Lord, and I try to help these people the best I can. Maybe some of this stuff, God's trying to show me that, hey, look, this is real. That's why I'm allowing you to see it. It's not a figment of people's imagination. You know, Jesus, said in the Bible, blessed are those who have not seen yet believe. You know, people, we come to Jesus by faith, in faith, faith in him, faith that he is who he says he is, and you know that's the thing. I have prayed and I said, Lord, if this stuff is truly real, because it made me wonder about some of these people. I said, Lord, I'll just tell you in your audience, I said, Lord, if this is truly real, let me see, let me find out with these people, because I don't want to waste my time on stuff that's phony, fake, or somebody hallucinating, or an illicit drug. And these, like I said, a lot of these people were good, upstanding people in their community. I mean, they're not people that's out, doing hardcore drugs like LSD or mushrooms, or, they're not out doing DMT and all this other things, that some people see things, when they consume and partake of these things. If you know what I'm saying, I believe that the Lord allowed me to see what I have and experience for a reason, because we are definitely an end time event, in the end times. And Jesus said, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be before the coming of the Son of Man. People try to tell me that, they scoff at, Nephilim in the Bible. I live in West Virginia, and I have seen the accounts in newspapers of multitude of newspaper clippings from this area in all parts of West Virginia, that these things are real. I have talked to people that have actually had some of these things were discovered on their property that were 7 to 8 feet tall, not no 12 or 14. Some of this stuff is a gross exaggeration of how big these things are. I've had people tell me that once upon a time there were 50-footers walking around. It's like, no, you know, I have experience what I can see from here in West Virginia in newspaper articles that I have read for myself. My wife and I do a lot of this investigation. We dig deep. We don't just, go along with the latest frenzy. I mean, with the latest, story. We check these things out. And there is a multitude of newspaper clippings here, even in West Virginia, that were anywhere from 7 to 9 footers. One counts up to 10 feet tall, 9 foot, 9 foot, 10 inches, or something like that. These things are real. I believe what's printed in the pages of the Bible. I have seen the newspaper articles. I've been to places. Have I seen the Nephilim? No. But I've seen the evidence of it. I've seen the newspaper articles. I've seen the reports that's out there. And a lot of people, all these things are not exaggerations. They're not just sensational stories. There's a lot of things out there that are, people do things for deception. But there's a lot of real, bona fide, genuine activity and accounts out there that, I know it's real, and I know it's a lot to take in, you know, and like I said, and I'll state this on the record, I believe that the Lord allowed me to experience, because He's trying to show me that these things are real, that not all these people, thousands of people, they're not hallucinating, they're not on drugs, they're actually seeing a genuine, bona fide phenomenon.
Yeah, I agree. And it's taking place all over the world, and you hear reports like this all the
Yes.
time. And I just don't think people are able to process the information and properly digest it.
Well, Eddie, I know it's a lot to take in. It was a lot for me to take in. I had naysayers that came on that, I got to help me, because I got to the point when I lived in Virginia, I was swamped with stuff. I have investigated almost 100 cases. And yeah, there was some of them out there was misidentified. That was, I had people that knew. I had sheriff's deputies that that confide in me. We talked about stuff that I know them, but they'll never come on the record because they were ostracized and even lost their jobs on the force because they got involved in this stuff. People that were, like I said, sheriff's deputies, people in the community that had jobs that lost their jobs, but it's like, look, no, we don't want you on the job. We don't want you here. That they, I know these people, and they was like, look, it happened. It's real. And then it's like, if the people out there listening that will listen to this, once you have that experience, it's going to change you for the rest of your life. You can be a naysayer, but I've known ones that have laughed and mocked and scoffed until they actually had the experience, and it was a game changer, and it was a life altering experience. And these people were never the same again. I mean, just like yourself, the encounters you've had, the things you witnessed, it was real. It wasn't a figment of your imagination.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just something that you'll never forget.
Yes, sir. I mean, that's, and I look into all these things. When people tell me stuff, I look into these things. I go and look at reports. If you want, you can send me your email address. I'd be more than happy to send you reports, the newspaper articles, and the stuff that I have, and let you see firsthand. Well, sheriff's deputies going on the record, that the newspaper interviewed. I don't know if some of this stuff is still available. It may not be anymore. But I tried to scoop it up while it was still available to the general populace, and I have the newspaper articles. I have MUFON reports. One of the ones that was within 5 miles of the place where I was seeing this stuff, especially the aerial phenomenon. There's, a pilot and his son came on the record.
Yeah.
And yes, I do have some photos and pictures and stuff out there, but I don't post them out there for a lot of places because the thing about it is, with today's society, and I'm just going to say this, there's people that put stuff out there that's photoshopped, that's digitally altered, and things like that, and it makes it very hard for ones like you, myself, and yourself, and others that's out there that's in this, that believe that this is a genuine and have seen this as a genuine phenomenon. It makes it hard when people fabricate stuff. They come out with altered pictures, and Photoshop pictures. And I've had people that's, tried to send me stuff, and had people look at it to know it's Photoshopped. It's been altered. It's been computer enhanced, you know, it's been computer Photoshopped, and images imposed. It does make it hard on us to take this seriously, to go out. There's been times where I've just about washed my hands and say, I'm done with this. It's because of all the nonsense that goes on out there. If people that don't have genuine things that happen to them, that they throw frisbees up, for crying out. I've seen pictures with frisbees thrown up and snapped and took pictures of it, with hats that thrown and took pictures of it, with stuff that was imposed into the photos. It's not genuine. That's why I won't put the stuff out there anymore unless it's genuine article newspapers, it's genuine reports that I know they're going to say, well, you can, these are genuine reports. I can have people that take photos all day long. You can say, well, hey, that's Photoshop, that's fake, that's phony. But I have eyewitness testimonies from people that were there. There are newspaper articles. There are MUFON reports. There are people from police officers, firefighters, storekeepers, that this stuff goes back to the 50s and 60s in these areas. So,
Yeah, I agree. And I appreciate you for sharing all that information. And Theodore, I really
yes,
want to
sir.
thank you for being a guest on the show and sharing all the experiences and encounters that you've had in your life. And It really
Yes.
means a lot to me.
Well, thank you, sir, for your time and for allowing me to come on and share things. Maybe further, maybe somewhere down the road, I can share other experiences that I have had that, once I can go in and maybe somewhere down the road, maybe I can get some of these people to go on the record that were, tell about. But a lot of these people have been, like I said, have been ostracized and criticized where they won't go on public record anymore. They said, forget it. We don't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can understand why. But yeah,
Yes.
you did an
So your
excellent
name
job.
is,
And
well, thank you, sir. Your name is Miel?
Miguel.
Miel. Okay. Miel, it was very nice talking to you and be able to share these experiences with people. And I hope this helps people out there that do have genuine experiences. Um, you know, if they want to, I won't give out my telephone number and stuff, but if there's people that are needing help, that want to genuinely get in contact with me, I will allow you to, give out I guess, my email address or whatever if you would like to, but no, I won't give out my telephone number or anything. I don't want my telephone number, published out there or anything like that. But if there's genuine people, because I genuinely care, my wife and I genuinely care, and we are in a ministry to help people like this that come to us that don't know where else to turn to for help.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good to me. And I don't know if you get in the comments on YouTube, but I'm sure there will be people chiming in and you can
Yeah,
talk with
if
them
they want
there.
to.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. If they would like to, it's because there, like I said, this is a genuine phenomenon, and I know others out there that I'm not the only one here in West Virginia. I know people, other, people like yourself that investigate these things. I mean, I have a retired chief police that's this, West Virginia state section director. I don't know about now, his health is not as good as it used to be, but he goes out all over West Virginia and Pennsylvania. I mean, he's the state section director, and I don't know but if they look in West Virginia, MUFON, they can find his name. I have talked to that man. I've showed him some of the things in confidence. And, he takes the reports and he's, the part, he has a part of runs the Pennsylvania Bigfoot research. I mean, that's out there too, and he's the state's, last time I spoke to him and seen that he's still the state section director for West Virginia. And he's had all these multiple encounters too, and he's been at this a lot longer than I have. I mean, he's a retired chief of police, so I mean, he's has a law enforcement background, and he goes out and investigates these things too. So, but thank you, Mia, for your time and allow me to come on and share my story. I didn't mean to be so long-winded, but I did want to share the things with you. I know I shared more than what I expected to share, but what was on my heart and mind, there's people out there that have genuine experiences. They need the help. They don't need to be, classified as if they're crazy, there's something mentally wrong with them. There's people that see things that's genuinely real, and I just want people out there to know that that was my main reason for coming on your podcast and on your show, is to let people know I'm just one of many voices out there, one of many experiences. But once again, this is another confirmation to them as a child of God and as a man of God. There are real phenomena out there that these people don't need to be belittled, especially if it's a genuine experience. They don't need to be ostracized, belittled, and made fun of because it's a genuine experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. If you experience anything else in the
Yes.
future, feel free to contact me and I'd love to talk
I
about it.
sure will.
Okay.
Uh, would you like for me to send you some of these newspaper articles and reports that I have? If if you want to after we end the program, or you can text it to me or whatever, or email it to me, and I got you. Well, I'll tell you what, I have your email address. I'll just try to get some of them and send to you.
Okay. Yeah, feel free to send me
Okay,
whatever
sir.
you would like, and I'll take a
Okay.
look at it.
Okay. Well, Miel, thank you for this is last words here. Thank you for your time and allow me to come on and share my experiences for other people out there too, that genuinely have had experiences. I'm not nobody special, but I feel like the Lord put me into this type of ministry or work to help people out there. So thank you for your time. God bless you for everything you do. You sound like that you are a Christian man. I believe that you're a Christian man, a fellow believer like myself. And thank you also for what you're doing, for allowing people to share their experiences, because this is only one of a very few platforms that I'm aware of that will allow you to share the things that genuinely happen to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you very much. And yeah, feel free to
Yes.
reach out anytime if you want to talk about
Okay.
anything or if you want to share anything. And like I said, if you experience anything else, feel free to contact me.
Okay, sir. Thank you, Miel, and you have a good evening.
Yeah, you too. And God bless, my friend.
You too.
All right. Take care. Bye.
And take care. Bye bye.
All right, Theodore, thank you very much for sharing your encounters from Virginia. And this was actually an old report that I had filed away. So, Theodore, if you're listening, I apologize that it took so long for me to get this report out there. And over time, people keep calling and reporting their sightings, and they keep stacking up, and sometimes I lose track of certain ones, so I apologize. But yeah, the activity that you experience is pretty terrifying. I don't feel like it was very welcoming when they were throwing the rocks at you. And a lot of people say that they want to be our friends, they're friendly. A lot of times people say that these structures that they find out in the woods means welcome, but I don't feel like that, especially when these things are paralleling you out of the woods at nighttime. They're pushing over giant trees, they're bluff charging you, they're throwing rocks. To me, that is a clear indication that they don't want you in the area. So a lot of these researchers that act like they know what they're talking about and say that the tree structures means welcome, friends, I don't feel like that is accurate. Now, I don't think that these things are necessarily out there to kill people and hurt and harm individuals, but at the same time, there is a lot of missing people out there and people that claim that they've been attacked by these things. And there's some people that have had horrifying experiences where they've been chased out of the woods and these things are beating on the door. They're trying to come in the house and they're just destroying things. And that's scary. So I don't feel like necessarily these things are wanting to be our buddies, but at the same time, I don't feel like they're out there to get us. I just think that in some cases there are these evil Sasquatch that will, potentially hurt someone or take their lives. I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments below. Do you feel like this is possibly connected with UFOs? A lot of people that have had an encounter have experienced the paranormal and they've seen a UFO. Not everyone, but at the same time are the people that turn in these Bigfoot reports holding back because they don't want people to think they're crazy. I often think that a lot of the encounters that have been reported to, let's say, like the BFRO, they're not wanting to tell their paranormal experiences or if they've seen a UFO. So you have to keep that in mind, that maybe some people are holding back, which does alter the reality of this situation. But again, we can't say it's connected to UFOs and aliens, but at the same time, there is definitely something dark going on, and we have all these hints and clues that are scattered around, and we just have to put it all together. But we'll know when we know. That's the best thing I can say. But yeah, I appreciate everyone for listening, all the people that tune in all the time, and the people that support the channel. Until the next one, you guys be safe out in the forest.